we're live.
We are.
Hi, I'm Joel Furchess for the Mentionables, and we're going to be continuing our discussion of 10 questions to ask every Christian. This is number 2.
If God is our Father, why does He allow free will to harm His children? Many people are born into horrible lives before they ever have a chance to make their own decisions. These children are abused or neglected, and God does nothing. I understand letting adults be affected by free will, but I do not understand why God doesn't step in when it comes to children. Should all children not be given the opportunity to start out life with positives?
I thought that this question was worded a little strangely because free will does not harm anyone. Harm is caused by people abusing their freedom and causing harm to other people. Right? But this world where God steps in to stop all of the negative consequences of our actions would be a world that's completely different than the world He actually created. And it would not be a world that has the kind of creatures, namely us, that He put in it. We would not be the same kind of people. It would not be the same kind of world. You have to remember that mankind's purpose was to tame the chaos in the world. So if it is indeed the case that children should be given the opportunity to start out life with positives, then it is up to us to make that happen. That is our responsibility, our goal, our purpose. The reason we exist is to overcome these things.
Okay. 2. So, what this question gets at is the problem of evil. But you see, the problem of evil is twofold. You don't just have the intellectual problem of evil in dealing with this question, you also have the emotional problem of evil. Now, the emotional problem of evil is really hard to deal with because no answers will suffice in the moment that someone is going through that and dealing with that emotional pain and suffering. But while I'll try to address that later on in this video series, right now, the emotional problem of evil is not what I'm going to be dealing with. I'm going to deal more with the intellectual problem of evil, because emotional appeal by itself does not make a relevant argument. So, let's take a look at the intellectual problem of evil. The intellectual problem of evil is that, well, there's pain and suffering in the world. And since there's pain and suffering in the world, God cannot be all good and all loving because He wouldn't allow this pain and suffering. So, we've got a couple of questions. How do we know evil is pointless? Chaos theory and the butterfly effect limit our ability to calculate the minimal possible suffering within the world. Okay? So if God has a plan and wants to actualize the world, to allow love to be present, to allow us free will, what is the minimal amount of suffering that requires? We can't actually know because we don't have the ability to see outside of time and to find out if we're experiencing the minimal amount or something more. So while it may seem overwhelming to us in our current state, is it possible that some of the evil we experience will ultimately result in good? It's certainly possible. So at worst with this, we can be inconclusive. However, I think that if God is all-knowing and all-loving, and it's possible that He has morally sufficient reasons for evil and suffering, I have certainly seen sufficient reasons for the evil and suffering I have experienced in life. So while it's on a much larger scale, I certainly think that it is more than a little probable that God would have sufficient reasons for the suffering and evil he allows within the world. I don't have the answers to exactly what that is, but from what I've seen, from what I've experienced, I can say that I think it's possible that he has sufficient reasoning for the way he does things.
It's interesting to me that when instances of atrocity need to be illustrated, one always runs to children. Why is that? It's ultimately because of a sort of implied karma. Suffering adults might arguably deserve some level of suffering because they're autonomous, responsible individuals who potentially deserve the hardship, or at very least have enough agency to deal with it themselves. Children, on the other hand, are innocent insofar as they rely on others for discipline, education, and protection. Being as yet undisciplined, uneducated, and incapable of protecting themselves, they deserve no suffering, and they don't have the power to overcome it on their own. The problem of suffering, which this question teases, is one that can be expanded on a great deal. So I'll have to give some bullets, or this will become a very long video indeed. Firstly, it seems to me that to argue that a thing is evil by virtue of being unpleasant is to reduce value to a sort of black and white standard. If it makes me cry, it's bad. If it makes me smile, it's good. It's possible, and even demonstrable, that those things which are initially unpleasant can come to serve some greater good. The follow-up to this would, of course, be to list some horribly audacious things that have occurred to children. I'll let your imaginations do the work on this one, and trust that the outrage these events trigger will make you the argument. I have argued in my first response that this is a world in process, that God is creating the perfect world by perfecting an imperfect one, and that creating a perfect world would, without these processes, might be to ultimately accomplish nothing. Part of this process is to bring justice to the unjust. What this means is that for children who suffer, and for those of us who watch them suffer, we have hope, both that justice will be served and that the child will be perfected.